Okay, we will get started. I'll call the meeting to order and remind everyone to please disclose of any pecuniary interest at the appropriate time. Are we up and running? Yes. Okay. And perhaps we'll start one more time.
Thank you.
All right. Welcome, council. We are going to call the meeting to order. I'll remind everyone to please disclose of any pecuniary interest at the appropriate time. And we will acknowledge that the ancestral land acknowledgement is on the agenda. And go to the minutes of the previous council meeting of July 11th, 2022. We need a mover and a seconder to receive and file those minutes. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Westgate. Any questions or comments on those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving and filing those? Thank you. No business arising from any previous meetings, and we do have our scheduled meetings and events on the agenda here, and I have been advised, I believe, that we have received confirmation of all 4 of our delegations at AMO. So Councillor Morris and Amanda Gubbles and I will be attending those. So we'll give you an update on that after following the AMO conference. And we'll go on to councillor commitments and items. Anyone have any commitments that they would like to add to the schedule?
September 28th.
Can you use your microphone, Councillor Westgate?
September 28th to October 1st.
You, anybody else? Okay, we will go to councillors' items and we'll start with Councillor Mitchell today.
Just wanted to thank everybody for coming out to Cornfest. It was a great event from what I saw. We were up, Paula was up husking corn all weekend. And Logan had a great sales for the ice cream. So appreciate everybody within the community. It's been great.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to mention that as well. And we'll mention at this time, the Optimist, the Rotary, the Watford Skating Club and the Killer Bees, who all work together to try to make that event happen. So we're really appreciative of them. Councillor White.
Only item is Arcona Road, just when how much it's getting graded. I know it's with the rain, it's been tough, but there are potholes it's getting rough again. So, yeah.
We will make a note of that. And
the increased traffic that I know between Zion and Egremont has been bad. But
yeah,
it may be confed too. So, yeah.
You want to speak to that, Amanda?
Just thank you, Councillor White, for raising that issue. Based on a previous direction from Council, our public works staff have been paying extra close attention to that road and have done some additional grading in order to kind of address those potholes and planning for weather, hopefully, to continue that process. And yeah, thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks.
And Councillor Morris, do you have anything for council tonight?
The only thing I have, Madam Mayor, is the same as Todd did about Arcona Road. I was on it and the dust is getting really bad too. We might have to look at calcium.
That is definitely noted. I believe we did mention that to staff at the last meeting as well.
I'll just add further to that. Thanks, Councillor Morris. We did receive that feedback as well about calcium, and given the state of the road at the time, the note came in and the initial note and the pending rain, there wasn't an opportunity to coordinate calcium, but I have advised our public works team to continue to monitor and see if it's possible and if necessary based on the weather and of course shipping and coordination timelines, which are challenging right now, but we will absolutely monitor. Thank you.
And Councillor Westgate.
I've had a couple complaints. One about the weeds growing through the sidewalk and around the signs on Main Street, and especially down Aaron Street. I think we get a weed whacker out and go along there. And the other one was during the Corn Fest. along Centennial Ave, across from the Centennial Hall. There's a brand new fence put up there. They spent a lot of money on that fence. We had trucks pushing the fence over. They were actually pushing the fence in. So we need to get some curbs or something there to protect that fence a little bit. Maybe if we can't get curbs right away, a few posts with a ribbon around it just to keep the traffic back away from the fence. The owner was quite upset when I imagine she spent a lot of money on that fence and it's getting pushed over.
I did see that as well, and I noted that there was a truck that actually had hit it as well, which was awful. And it is such a beautiful fence too. They must have spent quite a good amount of money, and it looks so beautiful along there that it would be good to protect it. Anything else, Councillor Westgate?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, the only other thing I had is a slight apology to council that I did take it on myself to present the Senior of the Year award to our very deserving recipients, Joan Westgate and Lucy Buttery. We presented that award at an event prior to the Corn Fest because we knew the two of our recipients were going to be together, which has been a very big challenge, as council is well aware. Councillor Morris was able to make it out. It was a very stormy night. I thought, oh goodness, I'm going to get struck by lightning on the way into town to try to present this award. But we did want to, as a council, recognize both Joan and Lucy for the work that they did, not only in our community year after year as a part of the Watford Warwick Horticultural Society, but also during COVID, they took it upon themselves to put together a team of women to make hats for our frontline workers so that they could attach their masks and not have it affect their ears. And that made a big difference for the nurses and doctors who are on our front lines. So council wanted to recognize them for that project. And we are very grateful to have amazing seniors in our community that do so much to make it the wonderful place that it is to live. So I apologize to council for the short notice of that presentation, but we were already behind almost a year in presenting it. So we wanted to get that to their very deserving hands. And they appreciated the recognition as well, I believe. So we will move on to staff items and a verbal update from Amanda Gubbles on the Lagoon and Industrial Park farmland lease.
Thanks, Mayor Rumboats. I just wanted to advise council that based on the expiration of our current agreement with our leaseholder for the industrial park and the lagoon farm land leases, which is set to expire at the end of September, the municipality, we have issued an advertisement and a bidder's package for the retendering of that farmland lease. And it has been posted on our website. I've included a package here just for anyone who's watching the meeting and may be interested. And also will be advertised in the local paper. So the closing date and all the details are in there. But if you or anyone asks you for questions, please feel free to refer them to our office. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you for that update. And we will go on to the GL report. We need a mover and a seconder to receive and file that report. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor White. Any questions or comments on that? All in favor of receiving and filing that? Thank you. Then we'll go on to the non-action correspondence. Is there anything council wants to pull out or recognize from the non-action correspondence now? All right, we need a mover and a seconder to receive and file the remainder of that. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor White. All in favor? That is carried. And we'll go on to the action correspondence. And the first item is the Brook Alvingston Agricultural Society request for a donation to the fall fair. And are they not on our list? So we don't need a motion then?
So they are currently on our list, Mayor Brumba. It's for an annual donation for a different amount. I believe currently they're approved annually for $250. So this letter, I think, is requesting some additional funding so that the 250 will automatically continue to go to the group. But if council wishes to approve an additional allocation, they would need a resolution.
Thank you for that clarification. I do see that. It's asking that we hope that Warwick Township would consider increasing its annual contribution between 1,000 and 2,000 to help ensure the success of the fair. How does council want to deal with that request?
I'll make a motion, we go to 1,000.
I'll second that.
Okay. And would that motion be to do that for this year only or for contributions going forward?
I think it should go forward.
And the seconder is okay with that?
I agree.
Okay, thank you. So to 1,250 annually or 1,000 annually?
I was gonna say 1,000, but we may as well make it the 1,250, and that's not a whole lot for the fair. That's just about as much hours as theirs.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor of increasing that donation to 1,250? That is carried. And there's another second correspondence. Or we can just receive and file the remainder.
Even receive and file the remainder.
And that's seconded by Councillor Mitchell. Thank you. All in favor? That is carried. All right, we are going to move on to staff reports. The first one is the quarterly status report. We need a motion to receive and file that information. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell, and seconded by Councillor White. Any questions or comments on that report? Yes, I would turn it over to Ms. Gubbles to comment on that.
Thanks, Mayor Rumbouts. I do just have one comment. I just wanted to highlight something I think is quite significant for council and for staff is the balanced scorecard in attachment A does outline the status of all the priorities set in council's strategic plan for this term of council. And I'm very pleased to report that we've made some really great headway on those targets with almost all being achieved. And I do believe by the end of the term, in October, we should be in a position, well, really in November, we will be in a position to have a check mark beside every single one. So I really want to thank council for setting that direction, but also especially to our staff team for their dedication and work towards really focusing on those goals for this term of council. I just really wanted to highlight that for you.
Yes, I would echo that. And I'm sure all of council joins me in saying that it's pretty amazing when we first started this term and we had that scorecard, it seemed very daunting and like a really high bar to set. So it was pretty exciting to look it over. And I was even in the attracting the new businesses. There's a couple that we missed in the report, like McCann's and Jacob Justin's Lawn Care. Beal Realty is in here now. Shanahan's have moved their office in. So there's a lot of really exciting things happening above and beyond what our initial goals were. So it's always good to see and appreciate staff. Oh, Councillor Westgate.
I had one question about projects. Number 73, the wall of the fire hall in town here. What's happening there? And have we decided how they want to fix it?
Great question, Councillor Westgate. Yes, so the project still is in kind of a scoping phase. We have re-engaged the structural engineer who did the report initially, so not CBRE, but the actual structural engineer to create a tender package and a scope of work to remediate that back wall. My understanding is we're expecting that package and set of scope of work to come from the engineer any day now, in which case we'll be able to tender and or get some updated pricing.
I would just like to see the scope of work before it goes too far.
All right, any other questions or comments on that? All in favor of receiving and filing that for information? Thank you. That is carried. And we'll go on to B, which is the municipal election update, and we need a mover and a seconder to receive and file that report. Councillor Morris and Councillor Westgate. Any questions or comments on that report? Just a reminder to everyone that we do have an election coming up. And we do have some good applicants, and it's always good to give the community the opportunity to vote for the candidate of their choosing. So it's great to see that we are going to have an election for both mayor and for council this term. Any questions or comments before we? All right, all in favor of receiving that? Thank you. That is carried. And we will go to the review of committee structure and procedural bylaw and recommendations in advance of the 2022 to 2026 council term. So I'm going to ask our planners if they want to join us up at the table. Is this the right one? No, sorry. This is. Sorry about that. We're going to put a hold. You're always welcome at our table though, Ken. You know that. All right. We need a mover and a seconder for the recommendations, and then we'll discuss them. Moved by Councillor Westgate, seconded by Councillor Mitchell. I'm thinking Ms. Govels wants to speak to this report unless there's questions. Councillor White, can you use your mic?
Do we need to should we even be deciding this before the term of the next council, which is only a month and a bit away? I'm just asking.
That's an excellent question, Councillor White. And when certainly council can consider in your process from a governance review perspective, right before an election is the perfect time to do a review, in my opinion, of efficiency and effectiveness of governance throughout the term of council, right? And it is also because of the upcoming election and council orientation that these changes are being proposed at this time, because if they were made, they could be included in councillor orientation and then trained on also councillors who are elected, but know kind of what expectations in terms of the calendar of meetings and that kind of thing. But certainly, I mean, we put this here as recommendations for consideration, and if council, for consideration.
Thank you.
Council should keep in mind that at any time, the new council can make changes to these bylaws and to these recommendations. They can always start up a new committee if they decide that is needed. It's completely up to the council of the day's discretion. Because I had the same question too, Councillor White. I was like, do we want to do this right before? But when Amanda explained it to me, it does make sense. Especially for, I've been in meetings where they have things like the, what's it called? Consent agenda. It just helps speed things along and move things along. And it's a great addition to the meeting. So is there any other questions about specifics? Councillor Morris.
Yes, is this to make efficiencies, like not having to approve the minutes and stuff, Amanda?
Great question. So the proposed recommendations are multifaceted, I'll say. All intended to focus on efficiency, yes. One, the consent agenda is just a procedural update, which would allow those kind of routine, non-controversial correspondence items to be grouped in one resolution. So when you look at today's agenda, for example, you could by one motion approve non-action correspondence, receive and file reports, all in one motion. They're not used, and council could pull out at any time any item or discuss an item that's on the consent agenda. So there's still options available to talk about it. It just gives a nice kind of streamlined approval process at every meeting. But the other recommendations around committee structure, yes, are intended to be one kind of a review of our overall practices and approvals, because we are not currently using our standing committee structure in a way that it's intended, right? So that approvals go through Public Works and then through council. And we haven't been using it in that way, which does, I think from an overall governance perspective, kind of ask the question, or made us ask the question anyway, about what is the intent of those committees, and are they better served through council as a whole without creating that a potential delay in an approval process should we follow the overall process. And we did also, I would like to add note that we did look at all of our advisory committees. So we do see Parks and Rec as an advisory committee, unlike Public Works and Development, as well as Cemetery Board and some of our other committees like Community Improvement Plan Committee. And we think they're all functioning fine. So we don't propose any changes to that. Just the standing committee structure for consideration. I don't know if that answered your question, Councillor Morris, or not.
I don't know. Our meetings aren't that long, and I think we're pretty efficient right now. I'm not just too sure I want to just slip everything away through one motion. I kind of like the way it is, but that's just my opinion.
Just a note of that, like as Amanda said, if there was something specific that any counselor wants to discuss and pull from the consent agenda, they are able to do that at any time. So I think it's more the minutes, the treasury report, the non-action, things like that. So it's very similar to the non-action, only with a few more things. And if, as it goes along, I would imagine if there's an item that's consistently being pulled from that, the clerk would take that into consideration and not put that as a consent item. Would you think, Amanda? Yeah. Councillor Westgate.
The consent agenda works great at the conservation meetings, and it does speed them up a little bit. And anything that anybody wants to, if they have anything to say about anything, they just have it pulled out before we go through. And there's a lot of items that are just passed here anyway, so just speed up the meeting a little bit, and I don't think anything will be lost in the meeting.
Okay, so we do have the motion on the floor. If there, are we comfortable taking the vote now? I don't see any other comments. All in favor? That is carried. All right, and we have time to move on to, are we on D, the biannual report from Township of Warwick and Fire and Rescue? We need a mover and a seconder to receive that for information. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Morris. Questions or comments on that report? All in favor of receiving and filing that? Thank you. And we will go to E, which is the cost of living wage adjustment as information. Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor White. Questions or comments on that? All in favor? That is carried. And we'll go to, do we have time for F? I think we do. We will go on to the Economic Development and Promotions Quarterly Update. We need a mover and a seconder to receive and file that. Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Morris, questions or comments? Yes. Ms. Catrice, would you like to make a note of the public consultation that is planned as a part of this report?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So over the last several months, we've been working with CR Creative in Wyoming to develop a refreshed version of our existing logo. So on the Appendix A, you both, or council, should have the two options that we kind of narrowed down to. So I'm just looking for direction about public consultation. That was my recommendation. I thought it would be great to have public involvement in the form of a vote, similar to what was done with the current logo. And happy to answer any questions or take any comments from council.
So are we looking at doing an online survey similar to what we did with the design of the new hall, or what were you thinking?
So I'm open, but my thought was to do it as an online vote on Facebook with the two options, and people could vote on option A and option B. I know Southwest Middlesex, I believe that's how they had conducted theirs, but if council has a different preference, happy to take on your suggestions.
Councillor White.
Just wondering if we might have an option in the office if people are coming in to do that as well. So they're not on Facebook, that they can have an option to have their opinion put in.
I like that idea. I agree. Not everybody is on Facebook. Some people avoid Facebook just because of the nature of the toxicity that can be on there sometimes. So I think having an option aside from just the Facebook page would be a good idea, and also a good way to spread the message of what we're doing. Councillor Morris, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd like to include an option C of no change and have the existing one on there. The way it's kind of looking is it's either A or B. Well, if they don't want to change, I think they should have that choice.
That's a great idea. All right. That's some very good comments, I think, and feedback. So do we need to change the resolution at all, or can we just leave that as stuff? Okay, perfect. We will leave that as direction, and staff will take note of both of those feedbacks. Anything else? I think that they look really nice. I liked how you included different buildings from all over the municipality. So it'll be interesting to see what the public thinks. All right, all in favor of that report? That is carried. We have 3 minutes, and I don't think that's enough time to do the next one. The site plan bylaw. We are going to welcome in our Spreets delegation and we do have 3 minutes before we can start the meeting. For the Court of Revisions. Hi, Mike, how are you?
Good, thanks.
That's great. We can see you and hear you. We have about 2 minutes, so we're going to make sure that we go right on time, but we just wanted to welcome you into the meeting in the meantime.
Okay.
Two minutes takes a long time when you're sitting there waiting for it. It's unbelievable. It's like the clock stops when it's only a few minutes. And we did talk about the Corn Fest a little bit while we're waiting for the 2 minutes to come up. We had an exceptional turnout this year. It was unbelievable. I think we ran out of hamburgers on Saturday, and just overwhelming almost how many people were there, and the ball teams all seemed to have a great time. It was really, it was so lovely to see the whole community out again and able to enjoy that event again. And it was our 40th, I believe, this year. So, and there was many comments of how lovely it will be to have the extra parking next year and to be able to use the new outdoor kitchen. And so all of those, it was great to have everybody out, but it was also like, this is the last time we have to run back and forth thousands of times to get ketchup or mustard or whatever it is needed. So that will help a lot. And anybody from the community who wants to help volunteer, certainly they will be needed and welcomed with open arms to that committee. All right, we are at 6:30, so we can kill 2 minutes pretty easily around here. We do need a motion that Warwick Township Council proceed into the Court of Revisions for the Moffett Drain Extension for 2022, bylaw number 552 of 2022. Moved by Councillor White, seconded by Councillor Mitchell. Have any written appeals been received?
No, Mayor Rembes, there's been no appeals received.
Okay, does anyone present have any verbal appeals? Seeing none, we will move on. Since there's no appeals filed, the following resolution is to be passed. The motion that the Court of Revisions for the Moffett Drain Extension 2022 by law number 52 of 2022 be closed without changes to the report, and then we go back into open council. That is moved by Councillor Mitchell and seconded by Councillor White. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you for those of you who attended. It's super exciting 1-minute meeting.
It's a short drive. Thank you. Good night.
Oh, we do have a question here, Mike.
Okay.
If you want to come up to the table, Francis. Sorry, we're a little bit more formal with the online system.
Hey, Mike, just looking for clarity what 2B2 means, commuted payments with respect to lands. Then it talks about debentures. So years ago, debentures used to mean they would put it on your taxes. Is this what that is referring to, or is this how the township borrows the money?
I believe the reference to debentures would be the option for the landowner to not pay all of the cost up front, but to pay it through debentures over a 5-year period with some interest added. I'm not 100% sure of that document. It's a municipal document that I don't necessarily get to see, but that is typical, and I don't know if Amanda could elaborate on that a little bit.
I can, thanks, Mike. The municipality does offer a debenture program for municipal drainage works. Their debentures are available for amounts owing above $10,000. And I believe the parameters are 5-year repayment and the interest rate as we receive from the bank. And we would just enter a private arrangement with the landowner to arrange for payment, and you would be billed as part of your tax bill or a separate bill as well. But certainly anyone who's interested in that option can contact us and we can work through that process with them.
And do you know, is it repayable in full at any point?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you for that. It's always good to get those questions out of the way. Councillor Morris.
I have a quick question for Mike too. Mike, could you tell us the procedure if the actual bids come in higher than the engineer's report?
Yes, basically, if the tenders come in either below or over up to 33% above the estimate, there is no requirement of the municipality to do anything. But if it's over the 133% mark, then it's required by the municipality to go back to the owners to have a meeting to review that and then get some feedback from the landowners at that point. So tenders have been going up over time. It's hard to say exactly, what the tenders will be. We've done our best over time, but it is not easy in these times. So
That's an excellent question, because we have seen tenders go well above budget in the last year. So that's a great question. Okay. Did we call the vote? I believe we did. No? Yes, we did. Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Mike, for joining us. Have a good summer.
you too. Good night.
Okay, so We are going to move on to thanks, guys. Have a good night. We're going to move on. I believe we were on G, the site plan bylaw amendment, and now we will welcome our planners up to the table. So that report has a couple of recommendations followed by explanations and questions for council. And you're looking for direction. So do you want to do it kind of step by step then?
Good evening, your worship and members of council. So there's actually two items before you. So the first one is the issue of the site plan bylaw. So part of the reason that this has come back to you is an interesting loop as a result of Bill 109 site plan delegation. So where staff is now responsible for decision-making for site plan drawings and agreements, you now have a situation where in the site plan bylaw, any municipal related project essentially is not exempt from a site plan. So what that would mean is the town would have to prepare a site plan, deliver the site plan to itself, review the site plan itself, issue an approval for itself, and enter an agreement with itself. So you can see the rather circular issue. And having talked to some of my colleagues in the county planning directors throughout Ontario, you are not going to be the first municipality where this is coming up. And generally the trend is moving towards simply exempting, simply exempting these types of projects from that, because simply you are the controllers of your own process. And the fact is that when municipal projects are tendered, your public works staff are going out to people like Spreet or to professionals to deliver a service, and they're getting you drawings and materials and following process that we would do through a site plan anyway. So we're recommending that there be a standing exemption to evolve the site plan bylaw so that these projects are exempted. It basically removes this circular issue. It will get you to a building permit faster. So that means that for municipal infrastructure, that's a positive because it gets you to the building permit process faster. So the only other thing I would say is that this stemmed from an existing project. There may be a need for an exemption for that project, which council may want to consider doing tonight. But otherwise, projects going forward, if council gives us this direction, we'll bring an amendment before you as quickly as we can and would be exempted from site planning process.
Okay. Councillor White, you look like you have a thought.
I think it makes sense and would like to move that we make that exemption for our projects, and whatever the existing project that's underway, that's included in that as well.
Okay, and Councillor Mitchell seconding that. Questions or comments? Councillor Westgate?
Which our projects does it involve now?
I believe it's the addition to the back of the arena for the workshop. In practice, we have never had a site plan for the municipality because we are responsible. If there's something that goes wrong, we know that we're going to take care of it. So
Exactly. the
it
point
does
of
make
why-
sense.
of why
Yes.
We're recommending the change.
Awesome. Okay. All in favor of that recommendation? That is carried. And we will move on to the work plan initiatives, council report.
Just move the paper. There we go.
Ken, do you want to just walk council through each section with the different options?
Sure. So as part of the onboarding with Karen's been working with some of our landowners. So one of the initiatives that is before you isn't specifically in your strategic plan, but supports some of the strategic plan overarching goals, and that's related to the CM zone, which I'll get to in a moment. But the more critical piece that we have before you is the surplus farm dwelling severance process. So as you recall, in the official plan update, we talked about whether or not you wanted to embark upon that process. Under the provincial policy statement, you do not have to, but you made a choice to embark through that. And through the work of the consultants, we kind of laid out a process that put a lot of the public engagement at the front. So the rezoning is at the front, and then the severance piece is at the back, whereas the vast majority of your colleagues throughout the county do it the opposite way. And that's a historic choice that they've made. But those that are starting to embark upon this process, yourselves and Plimpton, Wyoming, have made the choice to do it opposite because of the recognition that there might be some public engagement needed, and the rezoning is really where that lands. So what we're asking for direction from council is to begin the process to prepare the necessary bylaw amendments. We do have a number of individuals that have expressed interest. I know we have one that has been calling almost on a monthly basis. Ms. Gubbles was good enough to respond to them tonight, and I think they're actually watching the feed right now. So there is interest in that, and we want to get that moving forward. And not to paraphrase Ms. Gubbles too much, but obviously that is actually part of your strategic plan initiative. So we want you to have a check mark at the end of your term. So that's extremely important for us to get moving. I don't know if we'll necessarily have a check mark. Maybe it'll be more like a half check mark, but we'll get there. The one critical piece that we wanted to get some clarity on from council, and maybe I'll ask Ms. Sander to weigh in on this, is how we move forward in terms of what type of severance that we look at. And I'm not sure if you want to add a couple of really quick comments. I thought the report was pretty clear, but.
Yeah. So part of it is that there's an expectation of what that property, the severance, will look like. Is it an acreage? Is it a residential, as in the same rights as a residential lot in the town of Watford? Or does it have the ability to live and breathe a little bit of agriculture? Because that's the types of questions that we get. Some people think it's a small acreage, they can have some animals, park some machinery, maybe still sort of quasi farm. Others are no, it's acreage, no farm rights. And then the third is it's residential, which is small and tight. And I think that's for the agriculture community needs to know what those severances, which can happen anywhere in the township, how do they behave? Because we don't want to create more conflict in agriculture by creating these little islands. And they are little islands, right? Because they are coming out of consolidations, and they may or may not be occupied by farm or agriculture backed people. So the zone districts are a little bit, we need a little guidance which way council is or thought of when they went through the official plan process, because I wasn't here and you were to a certain degree, what the intention for those severances would have been.
I personally have seen a small little farms, less than 5 acres, be quite lucrative, especially with organics and different alternative markets out there. And they work really hand in hand with the farmers that surround them and the land that surrounds them. I know of one barn in particular that does blued eggs, and they're very small, but they give the manure to the farmers around them, and it works for both sides. And it's a stepping stone for some younger families. With the price of farmland right now, it's nearly impossible for someone to be able to embark on a 100-acre farm. But if they could get their feet wet and start, but that's my own comment. Council, what do you guys think? Councillor Mitchell, or sorry, Councillor Morris.
Yes, I guess I'm a little concerned. Karen, are you talking about surplus farm dwellings?
That's correct.
Well, the surplus farm dwellings is meant to absorb what is needed for that residence. They're already existing. So if they're existing with a small drive shed and they need 3 acres for their septic or wherever it is and stuff like that, then that's the way it was to be. These small parcel, like you're talking about residential, are impossible with the septic system. The purpose of it was to keep the existing residents from being torn down and be used as occupancy to keep our schools open and stuff like that.
That's very helpful, Counselor. And the other thing that we'll keep in mind, assuming that council gives direction to move forward, is we're still going to have to go back and re-examine what the PPS provisions are related to surplus farm dwellings and severances related to that. So we always have to keep working within the confines of that, as well as there is a policy within the official plan of the county that was quite difficult, because originally the county didn't want to set a minimum farm size. And then the province did. We attempted to appeal, but as I like to say, it's akin to trying to climb Mount Everest with a thumbtack. It's doable, but almost impossible. So, unfortunately, we were not successful, and that stands in our policy as well. So there's a number of pieces that we're going to have to weigh in as we move forward, but just some general direction and feedback is very helpful to us. And the only other thing I would suggest, not just for this part of the report, but the next piece in giving direction, if council does make the decision to move forward on either, is not to really establish a time frame for when it comes back, mainly because we don't want to be in a rush to get it back immediately right after the election if the timing is such that we can't get any engagement or things like that, because there are minimum requirements in the act in terms of public engagement and things like that.
Councillor White?
Could the flexibility be geared to the size of the severance? And what I mean by that, if it's an acre, there's less flexibility on that than if it's 3 or 5 acres. Like, is that a reasonable thing in planning to do?
So through your worship to you, Councillor White, the way that the official plan was written is it didn't actually specify a size for the severance of the surplus dwelling. And that was mainly because we didn't want to set an arbitrary amount and then all of a sudden that it's an issue because maybe the septic doesn't work and you need to put in another field or anything like that. So the thought process was that if you were going to go through this process, part of what you have to justify in your application is that your septic system can function on its own. It doesn't need, you can justify whatever amount of space it is that you need. So it could be 1 acre, but then maybe after you start doing the analysis to prepare your application, well, no, it doesn't work. I need 3. And so that way there was flexibility to take into account a variety of different circumstances, right?
I'm just assuming from this discussion that council does not want to defer the work until after the election, though. Can we confirm that? Okay, so we're good with that. So
Looks like you might be getting another sort of check mark.
Councillor Westgate?
I think we should limit the size, like 5 acres should be lots and if you go bigger than that, even if you wanted to build a chicken barn on it, you couldn't because of a minimum separation, right?
MDS, yeah.
And I think 5 acres is enough, and I think it should be zone residential.
Through your worship, one of the challenges, if you start, when I look at how we do them in the rest of the county, we do typically, in most of the other municipalities, keep them as an agricultural, but non-farm zone, or the dwelling or the remnant that is the farm that gets put to someone else has no dwelling on it. And part of the reason for doing that is that if you actually start rezoning 2 residential zones, what we found was it was going to cause a whole new slew of problems with the MDS. As it was, we were kind of skirting some of those issues with the way that we were doing it, or avoiding them outright. And so it's probably not the best idea to suddenly start changing to a residential zone itself. But I think that we can look at the way our partners have been doing it to achieve the same outcome, but it would still be an agricultural zone that doesn't trigger a whole new level of MDS problems. Because regardless of what zone we apply, the MDS is always going to be an issue for any of these applications anyway, if they happen to have a livestock operation within about 1 kilometer or so of their site. They'll have to figure out the MDS as part of the application process.
My concern with going completely residential is that if there is a barn on that, I'm thinking of your property, Councillor White, like you can still use that. It's still a usable, implementable shed that can be used. And we don't want to limit people from being able to use what's already existing on the property. And putting too many regulations on it may just cause more red tape going down the line. And I don't think that that's council's desire to cause more problems down the line. It's like the looser it is, then we can kind of play with each application individually without having to change our whole site plan.
Yeah.
Councillor White?
Yeah, I agree. I think part of the reason is to maintain an inventory of shelters in the community instead of having them tore down like
Yes.
that way. So
That was exactly the point, yeah. And I take Councillor Westgate's point about a maximum size. It may be that we come to that point that, maybe the minimum is this 1 acre situation, but then there's enough flexibility that it could go to a maximum of 5. That'll be part of the engagement, is to kind of figure out how we set those parameters. And keep in mind, if it's a zone, then there's always flexibility to seek a variance too.
Councillor Morris, you have a
I think
comment?
the key word we're missing here is existing. These dwellings have to be already there. It's like the guy selling off his 100-acre farm and wants to keep the farmhouse. Well, the farmhouse and the septic and the drive shed are 2 acres. Well, then that's what it is. I don't know where we're getting in this rezoning of all, because it should stay the same as it was before, except it's a separate lot.
Okay, does that give our planning team enough direction then?
Sure. I
Okay,
think
do you need a
that's-
formal motion to?
We had suggested a motion to select an option of whether you wanted to defer until after, which was, where is it here? I think we had, council could defer as option 1, and then if you want us to do the work, option 2. So, but then we also repeated the same motion for the CM zone as well. So maybe I'll go through the CM zone and then we'll do the recommendations at the end, if that's okay, Your Worship. Yes, so just as council knows, the CM zone is your sort of quasi-industrial mixed commercial zone that is the lands as you come into Watford off of the highway. And so we've had a number of discussions about, we've had some inquiries related to potential rezonings. Council has done some site-specific rezonings. So, in talking with Ms. Sander, we've kind of asked the question, if we're making site-specific rezonings, is the zone really flexible enough? Are we missing something? Is it not operating the way it should? So what we're asking council is for some direction to go and do some consultation with the landowners, do some research, and essentially rework it and make it as flexible as possible. I think the conversation we had last week, without going into too much detail, since it was an in-camera conversation, was very helpful, because that reminded us all that the official plan gives a rather clear vision of what you want to see on those industrial lands. So the question we're trying to answer through this is, with that picture, does the zone actually achieve the picture? And our initial sort of very quick conversation in the team is maybe not, and maybe we should dive into it to make it more flexible. And that way people are not having to come before you for site-specific zoning amendments. So that is what we're seeking direction on, is to dive into that zone and make some changes potentially.
What is council's thoughts on that? I think we need to be careful that it not get too loose. We want to have some control, like we would hate to see, we already deal with a large landfill. And so you don't want just anything coming into that area this close to the residential part of town, that anything that's going to have severe impacts on the municipality.
Yeah, and I go back to the fact that council's vision for those lands is very clear. It's not any noxious industrial that is going to be belching smoke or creating odor or anything like that. So what we're looking at is one of the things that Ms. Sander has done is basically done a comparative analysis of the CM zone with your highway commercial zone to see, are there things in the highway commercial zone that would make sense over here that would achieve your vision and not create any of these sort of noxious uses? And do they actually align? And having some of those in both, does that make sense? So that's kind of where we're going. We don't have any intention at all to open up to these heavy industrial uses because quite frankly, council's been clear, that's not what you want in that location. So that I can assure you, we're not going down the road of.
Councillor White, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think how you explained it there, I am comfortable with allowing, like, as a group, to say, yes, let's look at that, because then it's consistent with other areas that are commercial in town too. And allows us to do that. But, and I think it still gives us the protections that we want for the area.
Okay. And I'm assuming council doesn't want to go with option one and leave it to as a delayed. Okay. Any other comments on that? So I would say we could group the two recommendations together and council could direct staff to initiate the housekeeping process of cleaning up both of those issues. Councillor White is, Councillor White and Councillor Mitchell. Thank you. Any other questions or comments before we vote? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you both for, that was very good explanation of the report. When I first read it, I was like, I'm not sure if I'm reading this right. So that is fantastic.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you, guys. And we are going to go on to the Zion Line reconstruction recommendation that Warwick Township direct staff with regards to the Zion Line asphalt and replacement. So you're looking for direction here. Council, how do we want to deal with this? Councillor Morris?
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of phone calls about Zion just when that culvert was out. I don't want to get the phone calls when the whole road's out because of construction. Is there any way we can defer this until next year when the roundabout is done? Like, I can't see us taking a paved road out of service.
I believe that was one of the things that was recommended for staff. So would you be moving that we defer the project to 2023 and combine it with the proposed 2023 road projects to hopefully attain tighter pricing then?
I agree. We take it to the next council for budgeting for 2023. As far as putting it together and that would be up to the new council. But I think we should defer it to next year. I don't want to see another one of our main paved roads taken out of service with this roundabout going on. That's just bad timing.
Okay, Councillor White?
Yeah, just along with Wayne, what was the planned timing on this? Because if we went out, can we specify that and still get it done before winter sets in after October 15th or whatever the roundabout date is?
So while we've had preliminary conversations with the what would be the successful bidder if it was awarded on their scheduling, I think they're anticipating that if it was awarded, they would start soon, like very soon. So we haven't had the conversation about the potential deferment till after October. So we would have to report back, but preliminary indications show that they were planning to do the work like soon after award of if today was the award.
I know in
So we could
consultation with
investigate.
the county, there is like such a tight window when it's dealing with road construction and as far as temperatures and moisture, all of that stuff. So it would be nearly impossible not to have the two projects overlap if we decide to go forward with them this year.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with Wayne. Then that probably should push it.
Councillor Westgate?
We may get better pricing this year anyway. Everything was high at the start of this year. And I do not believe we want to do it at the end of October, November when we have too many farmers in the road putting mud in with our stuff. We want it done right.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to go with option 3 on the report. Any other further discussion? All in favor of that? That is carried. All right, we have no committee or other minutes and seeing no new business. We are going to go into the closed meeting session for the items listed on our agenda. We need a mover and a seconder to do that. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor White. All in favor of that? That is carried. For those of you joining us on YouTube, we wish you a very happy and safe rest of the summer. And we will be coming back into open session, but only to close out the meeting. So we will not be coming back on YouTube. So have a good evening.